Well, today is going to be a little bit of a different stream. Um, most of my preparation went into beverages rather than the overclocking rig, which is something I haven't done in a while. So I don't know how successful this is going to be, but here's my supplies of local beer. It's a Friday afternoon, so cheers. Okay, so today we do have some overclocking on the menu as well, but it's going to be a pretty chill stream. So I think I have 8 of these 550 black editions in here. Well, 7 in here, 1 in the rig. One of them I've already binned on LN2 a long time ago, actually. Was this little guy. That one I won't have to check. Well, I might check it later on in the stream, but basically I think it did 6.4 valid, 6.1 32M or something like that. Let me double check. I was just looking at this. Oops. It's not right, is it? Like I said, most preparation has gone into the beers rather than the stream or the rig. Okay, there we go. That's about right. I was looking at this page just now, actually. It's kind of funny how outdated it is. It's from August 2015. But what I meant to look up is 550 Black Editions, which it's a bit of a it's almost sort of like a hidden sort of thing in HarborBot are these AM3 chips that give you lots of points. Delicious. Hello, HarborBot. There we go. Really fucked up zoom level as well. So let's recap. Oh, I didn't do a 32M. I remember that. I think I had IMC issues. Let's look at the single threaded stuff. I actually got the Cinebench gold. That's interesting. Oh wow, this is one of my first cold sessions ever. This is gonna make me nostalgic. The yellow J cloth for insulation, the Venom pod, which I don't use very much anymore. This is the like my old house as well, which was just I was basically benching in the kitchen. Wow, and I think it's on a Crosshair 5. 24 malt. That's right. I think I bought a 550 thinking it was locked, but then somebody told me that it was unlocked. So wrong board, wrong chip in a way. Interesting stuff. So this is, I think, a different chip that may have actually died with the board, because that board, I took it with me to Melbourne, didn't bench it there, brought it back home again, and then it died. I mean, it somehow died in my luggage or something. So never mind that. Let's go to the actual good chip that I just told you about. So this is June 2019. So over a year ago. Really nice chip that does 6.4 valid. That's not a bad rig pick either. I like it. It's already on my T-Rex. Nice. Okay, so 6.4 valid. Like I say, first chip out of 8, and then I never binned any of the other ones. And then we did just slightly lower than that, 1M. And here we're on the extreme. Today I'm on the UD7. Basically, I want that to become my benching board for AM3 more than it is currently. But I still have to install utilities and stuff. It's so hard to get an OS to run on this board. It's so goddamn hard. It's incredible. It doesn't seem to like HCI at all, actually. So 1.9 V core, good RAM, good on-core, even 4.8 on-core. Got a bit of BCLK drift. All right, so for today it'll be Cinebench. Basically, Cinebench is a good way of ambient binning. This is an old, as the background suggests, it's an old Team Cup OS, because that's all I could get to work. It was for APU benching, DDR3 APU benching, actually. Well, can't use Turbo V Core on Gigabyte as much as I would like to. Yeah, let's get rid of the drivers as well. CPZ 1.86, not ideal to say the least. Yeah, let's use the 32-bit version. No idea why it's on 15.5 multi, actually. So overdrive might actually work on this. That might be useful. So for the first time in a long time, I'm using Chiller. Weird. Maybe that doesn't work. This might be good enough. Let's see. Turn on the firewall. Let's dial in an OC using the UEFI, well, BIOS. While I download, or attempt to download this EasyTune version. So 5A is the latest. Stick that on 200. Everything else on manual, or auto rather. So this has an offset, so we want 125 millivolts. There's no LLC on this board, which is what makes it not great for multi-threaded stuff. Well, I say not great, but just a little bit different to what an Asus board would be. Well, I've got Cinebench 15 here. That's always a good start. You finally made it to the stream. Welcome. How are things going? Things are going all right. So first of all, it's the Friday of a 3-day working week. Secondly, I got a board to boot an OS that's really finicky about booting an OS. And thirdly, I have some beer supplies. Maybe I can start a straw poll on what beer should be next. So there's an extra special bitter. There's a Sauce Brewing Mango and Mandarin Weiss beer. It's this very interesting design, which is Fathom. I wish I could pronounce this stuff. Barrel aged beers, 7.2%. That could be a good one to end the night on. And then just some odds and ends. Well, the S'mores Man is quite a good label. So that's Toasted Marshmallow Nitro Amber Ale. And we've got a Fox Hat Metric IPA. Bitter one. I agree. Well, actually, at the moment, I'm on Stockade Brewing XPA. So, since this is a dual core, it takes a while to finish a run, but that's okay. And these are my chips to bin through. Another 6 of them. One I've been on LN2. I have 8 in total. 1 is in the system, so 6 more in potentially. This more sounds good. So how are you doing anyway? And how have you found the stream? Was it the Overclocking Discord? All right, I think that's going to pass. We can just kind of interrupt that run. So easy tune. Nice. Yeah, I think a lot of people come in through the Discord. This is a pretty chilled out stream. I have a dewar full of, can probably even show it. I have a dewar full of LN2 back here, but it's a really hot day and I just couldn't get myself motivated to actually do some LN2 today, so it's just binning. Which at the end of the day is preparation for LN2. So I ran through a few things earlier. My FM1 boards are really acting up for whatever reason. I already did a Z490 stream recently. I did some X299 LN2 off stream. So I'm sort of in a weird way running out of things to run on LN2. I always find that's really hard to, when you still have some LN2 left, but have done the main things you were planning to do with that LN2 delivery, to kind of decide what to do with the rest of the LN2, because it's really hard to, in advance, prepare 95 liters worth of benching, because you never know how badly or how well it's going to go. If you have lots of problems, that may actually cause you to waste a lot of LN2, or it might go the other way where you're spending so much time debugging, so much time tearing down and remounting the hardware or whatever, that actually you use very little LN2 because you're not pouring, you're just debugging. I'm not sure why that's hanging actually. So it can go both ways. Finally using my beer command again. There we go, Stockade Brewing. Oof, that was a slow boot. Such a slow boot. What's going on? I have 2 cores and 4 gigabytes of memory. It shouldn't be this slow. Okay, so easy tune. We've got our easy tune here. Can again be a little bit slow to open up. There we go. Exciting stuff. So 1.4 volts as set in the BIOS. Let's up the multi. So you might have seen that it sort of uses power state transitions to go to the top multi. That's one of the other issues with Gigabyte, is it for example, you can't set, hey, Hyper Barbecue, how are you doing? On Gigabyte, in EasyTune, you can't set BCLK using EasyTune without also affecting the multiplier. So if for whatever reason you're using PS check or one of those power state modifying tools to modify or affect the multiplier in parallel to using EasyTune for BCLK, it's going to lock up. I have had that happen to me all the time on multiplier locked chips, where you're trying to push BCLK as much as possible, and trying to use EasyTune for that is just a no-go, because you may set whatever 4x multiplier or 8x multiplier in the BIOS, but that doesn't matter. EasyTune will still set it to the stock multi whenever you're trying to change the BCLK, which is, maybe I can demonstrate it again. So I'm trying to go from 17.5 to 7, so from 17 to 17.5. It's currently on 17. Pressing set now. So it went to 12, and now it slowly transitions up to 17.5 again. Okay, let's see if we can pass 3.5 gigahertz. Blast from the past and need. So yeah, maybe it's worth spending a little bit of more time explaining everything about this platform. So as I said earlier, UD7, 890FX. That looks like almost a hang or just a really slow run, and an unlocked dual core. So in terms of, so 890FX was an exclusively DDR3 chipset, but on AM3 makes sense, right? But actually, the 790 chipset had some DDR2 variants as well, and if I remember right, this first set of unlocked chips came out in the DDR2 era. So, well, all AM3 chips have a DDR2 IMC in them as well, but this is the C2 stepping of DNAP. So there's a C2 and a C3. So the limited edition tweaker CPU, for example, is a C2 stepping. All of the early stuff is C2. On the locked chip side of things, there's a mix of C2 and C3. On the unlocked chips, basically 550 Black Edition, which is this chip, and I think that's pretty much it. I'm trying to think. So that's the dual core side of things. On the quad core side of things, I don't think there's a 955 C2 stepping. I could be wrong. So yeah, AMD first came out with dual cores, C2 stepping, but even there's C3. So, and the difference is basically they clock better. C3 clocks better. So my best DNAB is a 955 Black Edition, which does about 7 gigahertz on LN2 for SuperPi 1M and for Valid. The first 550 that I did on LN2 was pretty good. Good enough for, which position is it again? Third, and that only does 6.35. So you're talking 6.4 would be a good chip. So you're talking about 600 megahertz worse. The best C2s are about 500 or 600 megahertz worse than the best C3s. And actually there's, in terms of 1M, there's a 7.2 gigahertz 1M, I think, by MAD. So you could argue that the delta between the two steppings is even greater. But in terms of what I'm competing for, it's hardware points anyway. So you're competing for the best on that one hardware, that one piece of hardware. So 550 Black Editions, there's only C2 stepping. So I'm basically, I bought 8 chips from China. A few of them are the same stepping, or the same batch, but I think that's only 2 of them. Let's see. And I'm starting to remember why I stopped doing streams on Friday afternoon, which was the dodgy internet. But anyway, so so the letters always mean, you know, where it was fabbed, where it was diffused or whatever. That isn't so relevant in most cases for AMD chips. But then the first 4 digits are manufacturing year and week. So this would be week 31, 2009. So 25 APMW, 09, 25 APMW, I've got a 2 of. So they add another number to distinguish them. And then 0931 FPMW, I have 2 of as well. And every other batch is unique here. And this is the chip that I've already run on LN2. And the chip in there at the moment, I think, is number 3. So 3.5G passes. 175 Cinepoints or points. Nice. I wonder what would even be considered to be a good score here. I don't know how many actual scores that there are. Easy Tune 6. So, oh, Tantaketa has the ambient record. My buddy Tantaketa. What kind of volts did he push? AIO 1.488. Yeah, 1.5 is usually what these scale to. Let's see if we can do better. I mean, you say blast from the past, but this is still DDR3. This is still the second newest generation of RAM, so it's pretty new to me. Blast from the past would be something like SD-RAM. So here we have 18.5 multi. Let's go 19, which is 3.8. That would be pretty decent. I think I need to get my benching mojo back. Skylake X was damn fun though, managing as Coldbug. But there I kind of wish I had 3 hands or something, because you need to kind of be in control of your OS, your utilities and all that with one hand, and then you're pouring with the other, and then maybe I'd even like to have a third just to flip slow mode. That would be ideal. There we go. That's what I was looking for. Hey 65, how are you doing? Where are you based? That determines a lot, doesn't it? Because I have viewers in Europe, East Coast US, West Coast US, Australia. So it's really tough to stream at a time that's convenient to everyone. Actually, it's pretty much impossible. Looks like it's gonna pass. On your way to school. Well, have fun. It's already Friday afternoon here. It's 4:20 p.m. So I'm done with school. Actually work, but you know, the closest thing to school. If I find a really good chip here, I would be tempted to just quickly pull it down on LN2, but the way these things usually go, the chips might be too close to each other. If I find a standout chip that does like 4G or something, I'd be tempted. But then if I check it versus the chip already LN2'd and they're similar, then it may not be worth it. Yeah, I've sort of thought of the idea of maybe streaming twice a week just for different time zones. But I've been having so many difficulties with, well, real life, but also internet, that I kind of just am happy to get one stream out a week, no matter what time it is, realistically. So what does everyone think about Zen 3 launch? Okay, I think that's worthy of a screenshot. 3.8 is decent. I wonder what level of overclock that even is considered to be. Would help if I knew how to spell. Sweden's cool, actually. Been to Gothenburg and I've been to Stockholm. Don't be retarded, CPU World. Here we go. Well, 3.1 on the non-unlocked one. Yeah, 3.1. So that's a good, decent, like 20+% overclock. Where's my screenshotting utility? Obviously not on that thumb drive. It's the age-old story, isn't it? Nobody ever tourists in their own country. I'm originally German, but I haven't been to Hamburg, and people keep on telling me Hamburg is amazing, and it's just the desire, the burning desire, just isn't there. You know, when it's your own country, you think it's just going to be sort of slightly different to your hometown, and you just don't go there. I've come across so many Australians here who've never been to Tasmania, and for me, Tasmania is one of the most beautiful places on earth. But people are like, nah, when I get some time off, I don't want to go to my own country. I want to go somewhere else. So it makes sense. It's a shame, but it also makes sense, you know. Gothenburg. How could I summarize it? I mean, I was there 10 years ago. It's probably changed a lot. I remember there being a good botanical garden randomly, even though I'm not into botanical gardens. So if I remember it being good, it must be good. Okay, 20 malt 4G. Let's do it. There was this pretty well, that's looking like, I was gonna say it looked like a crash, but it's going strong. Famous last words. Okay, let's go 1.5 VCore. Actually 1.45. You could take this ferry to these islands just outside the city. So 50 more millivolts. How's our health status looking? 21. Okay, good. Yeah, so it was pretty cool. There was this bar called like Heaven 66 or something because it was on the 66th floor. That was random. I was just there for a long weekend back in the day when you could get Ryanair flights for €1 or whatever. Yeah, there was good public transport. I'm rambling on now. I really don't remember this place. Just had a lot of beer, and 10 years later I'm still having a lot of beer. So, you know, as much as things change, things also stay the same. But I do want to go to Hamburg, and I haven't been to Berlin in like 20 years. I was even younger. I think I was like 12 years old. So yeah, 20 something years, which is sort of crazy to think about. So I think our CPU's edge should show real volts. Well, I was wrong. Maybe in XP it does. I think this board has good sensing. So straight to 20 mults. So yeah, on the way somewhere, like I find it interesting that people, I mean, it's great, but I find it interesting that people use Twitch a lot on mobile. Like for me, when I watch Twitch, is that a crash or a really slow run? It can be hard to know the difference sometimes. When I watch Twitch, it's kind of a second screening. So let's say I'm benching, my background entertainment will be Twitch, or if I'm gaming, which I never really do anymore. Maybe if I'm watching sports and it's really boring, then again, why would I be watching sports in that case? Sometimes I do. I'm looking forward to the tennis on the weekend. This might pass. I'll have to make sure to DM my buddy Tanticata to tell him I beat his score. What board was he even on? Crosshair 4. I won't beat him on score though. That's for sure. With my terrible RAM. So yeah, I was a bit disappointed by Zen 3 launch, to be honest. The IPC numbers are good, but those prices. I mean, I know that the performance is better than Intel now, but it's still kind of a shock to see AMD being core for core more expensive than Intel. Because then it's really weird. Like from the beginning, Zen's advantage has been more cores than Intel, right? That's just the OS fucking up. That's not actually the bench. Bench is still running. So for that to be flipped on its head, where now AMD is so confident in its single-threaded performance that even though it has the higher core counts, Intel still has more cores at a lower price. It's sort of weird to think about. Like, I suppose from a, like anything, from a purely marketing capitalistic perspective, it makes sense, because if you have the better single-threaded performance, why not then sell each core for more? But you know, being on 7nm non-monolithic dies versus 14nm monolithic dies, it takes a lot of marketing spin and strategy adjustment to then come up with a release where your cores cost more. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Cores should be dirt cheap. That's the whole point of the architecture. And now it's sort of been tuned to such a degree that that's not the case anymore. I don't know. It's weird. And I mean, I guess we sort of already know that Zen 4, unless it's Zen 3 Plus, but I think they'll probably go the XT route again. And in that case, we pretty much know already that Zen 4, you know, is going to be DDR5. So this is the DDR4 swan song for AMD. One of these days I'll end up on livestreamfails.com. So for that to be it, I don't know. I mean, I'll obviously fully admit to the fact that I'm not the target audience for this launch. So the fact that I'm dissatisfied with it is to be expected. You know, AMD doesn't care too much about benchers. I suppose Intel doesn't either. Sort of relative to their size, AMD and Intel give approximately as many fucks about benchers as each other. So Intel gives more of a fuck because it's a bigger company, or at least, currently still is. But it's, sometimes a good benching generation is just a happy side effect. And since the Ryzen 3000 series was at the beginning at least such a write-off for benching, except for the unique core counts, which Skylake X is still relevant for unique core counts, so that's not saying much. 16 core, the 3950X, all it's going up against is the 7960X, which nobody benches, and the 10960X, which even fewer people bench. So saying that the 3950X is the number one 16 core in the world isn't saying much. For the 12 core, it's similar. You don't have a non-cold bugged Intel equivalent, so it's the top 12 core in the world, but it's sort of in a way the only 12 core, so I mean, I benched the 7940X this week, and that still gives 14 core globals because AMD doesn't have a 14 core. Now, that doesn't lead me to say, wow, the 7940X is an amazing chip. It just means it happens to be the only game in town, Ryzen doesn't seem as fun as Legacy. Yeah, in a way it isn't. Okay, so that's our 4G pass. And we have a screenshot. And here's 4.1. So the evolution, this seems like a very early hang. Okay, let's try 1.5. The evolution of DDR4 benching basically has been quite interesting, because let's just dial in our voltage first. Another 50. Oh, I'm going down instead of up for some reason. That's more like it. I mean, obviously the beginning of DDR4 was Haswell-y and Broadwell-y. Those were a bit special, so let's just put those to one side and talk about Skylake. Actually, it's put what was it called? Broadwell on the desktop. That was still DDR3, wasn't it? So anyway, that's in another bracket. So in terms of mainstream DDR4 benching, we've got Skylake, Kaby Lake, Coffee Lake, Comet Lake, and on the ND side, Zen, Zen Plus, Zen 2, and now Zen 3. And Zen will always have a special spot in my heart because it was just basically the first thing I ever benched cold. And I mean, the IMC cold bug is legendary, but it's just such a fun full pot platform to bench. You just keep pouring. I went to a convention, PAX Australia, and that's where I benched like probably the longest benching session of my life. Like I literally had the system full pot for like 9 or 10 hours, and it was just so much fun. And at the time, Intel's biggest chip was the 7700K, so you could actually get 6-core and 8-core globals, because it was a full pot platform. So 6-core was going up against whatever Broadwell-y, Haswell-y, some HEDT cold bug platform, and 8-core the same thing. So you could bench an 1800X and get number one GPU Pi, for example, 8-core, which is amazing. See, now our vid is showing. That's interesting. So what was it again? 20X? 20.5. Would be interesting to have temp sensing, like hardware monitor or something, hardware info. Please run. It's doing something. Ooh, nice. So yeah, like Zen was great. It was just so affordable because AMD had to come back from nothing. They had no reputation whatsoever. So the price to performance was just completely through the roof. You know, on something like an R5 1600, but even the quad cores, even like 1500, 1500X, 1400, I think was a quad core. They just had such a nuanced and complete lineup. Zen Plus, so the Ryzen 2000 series, that had its own appeal because you were suddenly able to do, you know, 3600 CL14, that kind of thing. Like it kind of took Zen and took away the IMC cold plug and gave us, I'm trying to remember the clocks, you know, a good first gen Ryzen would do 5.4 in Cinebench, let's say. It's 5.3, 5.4 if I remember. So Zen Plus, even though it was just completely downplayed by AMD, it was supposed to be just a nothing burger. It gave you, certainly for the ambient benchers, gave you at least 100 or 200 megahertz extra, easy. And the same on LN2. And then on LN2, it also took away the IMC cold bug. And that's just magical because you take a platform that's already so ultra simplified, like the Crosshair 6 Hero is just a magical board. And you can still stick your new chip in there just with a BIOS update. But instead of doing 2666 CL10 or whatever on full pot, you're now doing, you know, 3200 C12, 3400 C14, 3600. Should I be refreshing my memory or just going from nostalgia? Maybe at the end of this rant, I'll try and refresh my memory. Okay, so Stockade, decent brew. XPA, always good. I'd give it a solid sort of 3 out of 5. But time for the next one. And I think our mate earlier asked for the British one, so time for a geezer pleaser. Extra special bitter. Probably not the best beer to be having on a summer's day like this, but I don't care. Let's just do it. So let's see what we're all about. If I can get it open. So that takes us through Zen Plus. And it's still cold, so that's good. Zen 2. So what happened with Zen 2? Zen 2 had a much better IMC. So you start to kind of get an almost Intel level IMC. Like it can do, you know, 4666 C14. I mean, Intel's IMCs improved at the same time too, but Zen 2 probably arguably is as good of an IMC as like a 7700K. I mean, not that you would have a board that would handle A2 DIMMs too well on 7700K, but in terms of low and tight, starting to get close. But there was this new IO die concept, which just completely screwed with benching. Like it really screwed with benching. Why did I close it? And like a lot, like people are having to blast IO volts or VSOC volts just to get rid of the cold bug. You've got your FCLK divider, which people love because it kind of makes ambient benching more interesting, but on cold it's just a pain, you know, compared to the infinity clock always being synchronous to memory on Zen and Zen Plus. it just really screwed with things, because what you end up with is insta fail. Let's try for valids on this chip. What you end up with is like just these nasty cold boot bugs, you know. This talk of people torching up from full pot to -5 or -10 to be able to boot, and you know, maybe just board design wise as well, not as much effort put into it, because like all this talk about, you know, don't clear the CMOS, only use the retry button, or never use the retry button, always clear CMOS every time to try and work around the cold boot bug. It's just a pain. It's just a pain. Now with the XT release, that was sort of like quite an interesting benching release, because it didn't sort of add to the issues that I've already accumulated, but it added clocks. Along with the 3300X release, which was that single CCD CCX design, which made it easier on cold. So that sort of was a little bit of a redemption arc in terms of benching, purely in terms of benching. Like obviously gaming, you know, whatever, fucking amazing, yeah, great, whatever. I don't game, so I don't care. The same way that sometimes people come on my stream and say, what is the purpose of all this? It's not stable, you can't bench at these clocks, blah 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 blah. The same way I sometimes feel like I should go on a gaming stream and be like, what's the purpose of all this? You can't bench Cinebench on these clocks. You know, it's they're two different worlds, and I don't know, it's sort of in a way almost an accident of history. It's bizarre to say this, but like, as much as overclocking can it run crisis? Hi Ginger, how are you doing? As much as overclocking's origins in the hobby space, not on the manufacturing side. We know on the manufacturing side it started in the 80s, you know, at least, and then to overclocking. But as much as overclocking, like ambient overclocking in the hobby side came from the fact that basically manufacturers hadn't learned to bin yet. So it was a thing that was done back in the day to get more bang for your buck, essentially in gaming, because overclocking a PC really only made sense for gaming. Productivity wasn't really a thing back then. But those two spaces have diverged more and more over the years, to the point now where, you know, what are the workloads we run as a bencher? Cinebench. That's not relevant to anything. It's not relevant to productivity or gaming. It's its own thing, you know. Let's try for valids. Let's just make sure that we have XOC mode set, which usually we do. Looks like we do. Fuck off Windows. Let's set read-only mode. So Ginger, I've got the beer out today. So I've got a little bang at the moment. I'm more of a fan of big bangs, but you know, if all you can get is a little bang, then you take it. And here's our beers. You get the next pick, Ginger. So Sauce Brewing, Mango and Mandarin Berliner Weisse. We've got a 7.2 alcohol farmhouse ale. We've got the S'mores Man Nitro Amber Ale, or we've got a Fox Hat. So ball's in your court, Ginger. Your pick, next beer. It is Friday afternoon after all. Your mom calls me Big Bang. Well, I'm glad I set the flag in Twitch calling this stream that's, what is it called? What is the expression again? It's intended for mature audiences. And your mom is definitely mature, so there you go. Okay, time for some valids. Time to get back to benching before we get in trouble. All right, so that's a 4.1 valid. Let's go 4.2. Hope she ain't looking. Jeez. Would she take offense at that? 4.2. Okay, 4.3 hang. All right. Time for the next chip. So here's a bag of chips. What do we want to do? So here's a little spreadsheet. Spreadsheet. I think 4.1 was the pass, and then actually what are we going to do is Cinebench at 1.5 volts and then valid at 1.5 volts. I think 4.2. I can double check when I get back into the OS anyway. All right. And I think I'm gonna go, so that was an APMW, so let's avoid the other APMW, which is number 6. I'm putting that aside, and let's just go for number 4. That's the easiest. Or number 9. Let's go number 9. I don't know where number 4 is. VRM gets really hot here for some on this board for some reason. Using my tried and trusted 2-point mounting on the water block. Livestream 89 in October. I'm wondering whether I can make it to 100 before the end of the year. Maybe I want to wait for the new year, since, you know, 2020 things. Maybe I have a heart attack on Livestream 100. Don't want that to happen. So I think these chips were about 5 USDs or something. Very cheap. Like, nobody wants. I think that 555s for some reason are still quite popular. I have no problem selling my 555 binning rejects, but 550s just a little bit too old to be useful for anything except benching. Using my trusty GD900 Chinese thermal paste, of course. Buttery smooth spread on this. So I think the beer is decent. It's kind of what I expect from a bitter. Does anyone stream beer tastings? That's what I want to know. That's what I want to see on Twitch. I think Twitch has to get away from gaming. I think basically all of life has a potential to be streamed. I mean, not people lying down sleeping or like even eating. Like people are so interested in eating these days, that has potential, but pretty much anything, if done well, would make a good Twitch stream in my opinion. Well, it looks to be posting. It's always a good start. Appears there's no beer tasting streams. Start one up yourself. So Ginger makes his own beer. Stuck on C1. Let's try again. Slow to post. Let's give it a CMOS reset. That usually helps. Seems to be having some difficulties with training if I'm reading this correctly. So always a good option to pull a stick. These are hypers though, and usually hypers have good compatibility. Yeah, okay. I don't mind doing single channel. I think the binning result would still be relevant. Okay, start off. I think we did 4G on 1.45 volts on the other chip. I'm hesitant to... So this chip has a different vid. That's really interesting. I'm going to start taking down vids. So this has a 1.35 vid. The other one I think had a 1.225 vid. So you'd assume this chip is worse. Let's start off on 1.4. We definitely passed 3.8G on 1.4. I'd have a feeling that this chip mightn't do that. At least judging by vids. Could be the motherboard misreading it as well. Who knows? But let's see. That could start to be useful. Still don't know what this slow boot is about. I'm hoping to get just one or two standout chips and then just bin them on LN2. I'm basically hoping to cut down a lot of my collection. I think trying anything under 3.8 is kind of pointless. Do we let it restart? Let's play it safe. So interesting score on the homepage actually of our beloved Harbor Did Dominator do a multi-way record? No, single. 2.3. Yeah, the new cards are, well, that's 2080 Ti. Okay, I don't know why this person was running that, but okay. To each their own. AKM with the two-way 1080 Ti. First place in Vantage. So Vantage is a very CPU test heavy bench. But the fact that he beat Bob NZ, who was on LN2, so 2.5, 1550, and the 18 core. Always like looking at bench rig picks. That frozen over IO. Holy shit balls. Okay, so 2.1 and lower mem versus 2.5, and this is a pretty, so we're talking 136k and 143 GPU, 150 GPU, 120 CPU. So basically, even though Vantage is a CPU heavy bench, somehow the extra single thread performance makes dual card 1080 Ti on water, and not even particularly good water, like 2.1 through Vantage is, it's all right, but you know, so that helps the GPU score so much, you know, versus whatever it is, a 5.7, 5.8 18 core. That's fascinating. Unless, I mean, I don't think driver improvements can really account for it, because that was probably not even the recent driver at the time, just the fastest one. So for a new driver to be faster than that, and I don't think he's even going to be on a new, well, 445. Interesting stuff. I look forward to the day where 1080 Ti's are so cheap I can buy 4 of them and start running all of those multi-way benches that are not possible on the newer cards. So I think 18X is a reasonable starting point. Oof, that's still only 3.6. 19X then. 3.8. I mean, that's still weak sauce considering we ran 4.1. Yeah, 4.1 pass. And what was it in terms of valids? 4.2 valid. Okay, so I remember that correctly. I'm thinking like a 3.8, 3.9 pass on this chip, and 4.1 valid. So yeah, in terms of multi-way 3D, things get kind of complicated, right? So, well, in terms of legacy 3D overall, traditionally 01, 3 Mark 01 has been an XP bench, and the last, so Intel is faster than AMD. The last Intel release that had an XP, a hacked XP driver, was the 980 Ti. So that's what you'd use for 01. For two-way, it's the GTX 580 because that runs XP, and it's fast enough. I don't know if anybody has really like fully attempted to run like a 680 or something, but that's just the trend that we have there. Is 580 is the fastest. 3 and 4 way. I used to have the world records. Well, the global first place. I hate it when people call things world records that aren't world records. The only world records that exist are the overall world records. So Firestrike, all out world record, for example, whatever configuration. Vantage, all out. Cinebench, all out, which is actually a Zen server configuration. Anyway, so global first place, 3 and 4 way, is the HT7000 series, and I think I had the global first place for a couple of weeks on my 9700K. But I think Matt 26 LFC or something like that took it. I'm hoping to take it back on the 10900K. I just need to get my OS sorted and stuff. So that's 3 and 4 way. 03, 3 and 4 way traditionally was HT7000 series. Now we've had some results from Splafe and other people on 290X. So it's a bench that basically has less driver overhead on AMD. So it will stay with AMD, but it's kind of to be decided, HT7000, maybe with a good chiller setup, may still be competitive. Well, it is, you could get second or third, but in terms of first place, it's now Hawaii. To reduce intercar latency, actually, you're probably best off with a single 295X2 plus 7970X, sorry, 7970, HT7970, or then in the 4-way category, just two 295X2s. I don't have any 295X2s, but I do have a 7990, and that's tempting. 2-way and 1-way. Bit of a debate going on whether you just all out it full pot on 1080 Ti's or go 2080 Ti or 3080. Anyway, you need a modern card in any case. 05 is more of a CPU bench again. So their single card, I think 1080 Ti is probably best. Let me set up the next run before I keep bullshitting on. So 3.8 passes. Let's see about 3.9. So here we have our vid again showing up. Really interesting. .9. Yeah, for 05, you're basically talking driver overhead over anything. I mean, for the single card and stuff, you could say that Canyon still is GPU affected, but nowhere near 03. So you're talking just like stock 1080 Ti's, and just as much CPU speed as you can get. 06, similar, a little bit more GPU dependent, but just whatever you can get a good driver in, good efficiency in Windows 8.1. Vantage, obviously even 2 card is scales badly. Even 2 card, you're fine on like a chiller 1080 Ti setup. So that's where I'd like to get 4 1080 Ti's. Just Vantage 2, 3, and 4 way. 3 Mach 11, 2, 3, and 4 way. Even Fire Strike. Certainly Ultra, because it's so GPU memory dependent, and timings as well, which are not really editable. But there was a theory going around that the Galaxies have looser timings than the Kingpins for the 1080 Ti's. So even there, multi-way, you can be very competitive. Time Spy, I don't really know offhand. I would still reckon for the multi-way stuff, the scaling is such, and the CPU bottlenecking and stuff is such that you can probably get away. I've never run in multi-way. That's really interesting. I mean, all out, it's always going to be faster all out, right? But just the sort of the long tail there is pretty severe. Like, here's Kingpin on LN2, but that's just because it's his job and he has free LN2. You know, second place, I don't think Ralph ran 5-potted it, did he? Yeah, OC Lab, fair enough. But I think Bob was on Chiller. No, 5 or 6 sessions working on this rig. 400 liters of LN2. We're missing the secret sauce. Excuse me, it's allergies. So we seem to be passing 3.9. Meanwhile, so let's continue. What else do we have in terms of benches? I'm not going to go into Port Royal and all that bullshit. Just the benches that give global. So Fire Strikes, Time Spy, Vantage, 11. 11 is an interesting one. 11 is sort of more GPU because it's 4 GTs, a combined, and a physics, versus Vantage with its 2 GTs and 2 computer tests, CPU tests. It's actually more reliant on the GPUs, and that's why you have Bob and Zed. Of course, nobody benched it. Interesting stuff. And then, like, I don't know if like 4-way GPU Pi Chiller 1080 Ti's would be competitive. So we have a pass incredibly with this supposedly higher vid chip. We're getting very, very close to what the first chip did, but that's okay. I like surprises. Come on, Easy Tune. And we're on 1.4 apparently. Holy shit balls. So this is chip, what was that, 9? Chip 9. 3.9G. I wouldn't imagine it would pass 4, but you've always got to try these things. You might surprise yourself. All right, next step, 1.45 volts. Of course, with all I just talked about, the big unknown, of course, is the pending sale still of let's look at that thread actually, whether there's been any sort of developments. The pending sale of HarborBot to Case King. Ooh, someone PM'd me something. Missed out on some good PSC here. I think it was in the news section. Future of Hyrobot. Nothing new since May. Well, there we go. That's emblematic. That's completely emblematic of what's going on at Hyrobot at the moment. Isn't it just? A thread called The Future of Hyrobot. No update since May. 5 months ago. Well, it would be funny if it weren't so damn sad. Okay, so we had a crash at 4G at 1.4 volts. Now we're going to go try the same thing again at 1.5. Sorry, 1.45. So yeah, what I hope to see, whenever the influence of Case King actually starts to become apparent in Hybridbot, is a recognition of the past, basically. Like when you're talking, you know, benches that get globals. I know that Heaven had its globals removed, so did Aquamark, but that's sort of, you know, that's on the edges. Like I got pissed off by Aquamark losing its globals because it was an interesting bench. Heaven is also an interesting bench, but I sort of understood where they're coming from in terms of trying to reduce the number of benches that get globals. 06 got globals removed as well. With 05 and 03 in the mix, I can kind of stomach that. But if they start to do something along the lines of, I don't know, giving globals to Superposition and Port Royal, for example, that will be going in the wrong direction. Because Port Royal, I'm sure RDNA version 2 is going to be different maybe, but right now Port Royal is vendor locked to NVIDIA. So I don't want to see that. There's no other 3D Mark incoming. You could always tune, you could say like Firestrike Extreme loses it, but Ultra and regular keep it. But Firestrike is an all-time classic. And you know, only one 3D Mark 11 preset gets globals. Advantage is an absolute classic as well. So there's not much trimming left to be done. And it's on that basis that I always think the best of people when in doubt. So I hope that Roman and whoever else will be in charge will recognize those things and keep all of these benches relevant. And on that basis, considering that 3 and 4 way are completely unsupported by all current gen AMD and Intel cards. I mean, the RX 580 line of cards, basically the RX 500 line of cards, did 4-way. That's the last one. Vega didn't, and nothing that came after that did. Navi didn't either. And on the NVIDIA side, the 10 series is the last. So we'll have this interesting effect where we sort of get a semi-legacy benching category. You know, there's the true legacies, like something like 3 Mark 01 4-way, where you can keep your cards on stock, you know. And then you can have a sort of like a semi-legacy, like a 1080 Ti in Vantage 4-way, where LN2 might be overkill, but you still have got to watch your clocks a little bit, you know. So we have a pass, which is interesting. I don't know, what does anyone else think about this kind of stuff? Maybe you're just not big 3D benchers, which I don't blame you for. 3D is the sort of effort to reward ratio, or the effort to risk or the reward to risk ratio even is quite high in 3D. So this was chip number 9. So let's try 4.1. So that's applied. Let's also take a valid. Okay, time to go to 1.5 VCore. Yeah, also time for a bit of fresh air. I could do a scaling test for 1.55, but that would be purely sort of for my own notes. I wouldn't consider that part of the binning. Got 00 in the house. How are you doing? Kikona as well. Yeah, that is the other factor, is just the cost of it. There's particular niches of 3D that can be affordable. You can always go the GPU Pi route, where you can get something like a 980 non-Ti or a 780 Ti for pretty cheap, and the motherboard and RAM and everything are irrelevant, and then it's all about getting good sample basically. So that's one method. There's also older stuff, like you can get a GPU that's so slow that actually like a 9900K 10900K whatever on ambient clocks will be fast enough to just max out the GPU to unbottleneck from the from the CPU side, and then you just clock the crap out of the GPU. But yeah, it's not as carefree as 2D for sure. It's a lot more hard modding. Like 2D on LN2 has gotten to the point where you're running sort of no risk or close to no risk of killing your hardware on LN2 with a heater, whereas 3D LN2 is, things can go wrong. You can get moisture in the wrong places and then it's game over kind of. 1.5, we were trying for 4.1 Cinebench. So yeah, it's it arguably gives less points on average per hour spent benching it. Basically, it's more expensive per hour. Like, unless you really choose your battles, like I was saying, go back to like a HT2 2900 XT or something like that and bench that with ambient CPU. Yeah, otherwise you have to consider higher cost of CPU and GPU, plus the cost of, if you have a consumable cooling method like LN2, potentially you'll have to run that on both the CPU and GPU. So yeah, it's not easy. So 4.1 is applied. And seems to be running. Which is sort of the nightmare scenario for benching or for binning, is when every chip ends up with the same result. Okay, it doesn't pass. That's good news. So now what we do is we go for valids just to have another data point. So what I was looking at earlier was, you know, how competitive is 4-way 1080 Ti for a GPU Pi 1B? I'm curious actually. It's typically a bench where you have really high generation to generation gain, but you also don't see very much benching of it. So those two things might balance each other out. So we've got our Titan RTX, Titan V. So that's really interesting. You get no globals for 6th. That's crazy. Like the globals you get for first, any bencher in the world would love to have an entry in their profile, which is 140 globals. 87 is still very strong. 35 is at the point where even I, and I'm only whatever it is, 35th in the world or whatever, even I wouldn't care about this. So 4-way Titan V is already not fast enough to get good globals. And then 4-way 1080 Ti is at the point where you get zero. Like, okay, so we have this weird thing where you still get one token point, but basically the scaling ends before you get to ambient 1080 Ti, which is really interesting. Wouldn't have thought that. Okay, so we're done with our Cinebench, Cinebin, as we call it. Let's try for valids. So we've got our 4.1, 4.2 sets. Let's see if it validates. 4.2 validates. Weird. 4.3 sets but doesn't validate. Next chip. So same valid as the other chip, but not a 5G pass. I wish. Would I be confident in saying that this chip will do better single core, single threaded on an LN2 than this chip? They're quite close. The same valid. 100 megahertz difference in Cinebench, but the vid is better here. So let's go for this week 28 chip. So number 8. The other option worth mentioning for 3D, of course, is 2.5G, which is the old benches on a new GPU where you don't have to clock the GPU. So something like 3 Micro 3 on a 1080 Ti. Well, this happens more often than you think. No bench pins though, so that's good. So applying some thermal paste. Exciting stuff, I know. I hope Keep gets his podcast off the ground. That'd be fun. I'm a big fan of podcasts. All right. Fair enough. I know people have busy lives. Can't really expect to be commanding the both the visual and audio attention of every viewer. I'm just glad people tune in. And I'm always open to suggestions on how to make benching more mainstream. I don't really see a reason why, you know, something like Dota can have 200,000 viewers, yet benching can't even have 1,000. I really think it's possible. People are very impressionable, you know. I mean, millions of people watch Kardashians reality TV. That's not really something that's worth watching, but it's just this trend. It's like a fear of missing out kind of thing. So if we can create some sort of fear of missing out on benching, maybe that's unrealistic, but it's worth a shot. Maybe we need a CMOS clear. Doesn't look happy. So benching requires a lot of knowledge to understand. I don't know. I mean, I'm sort of thinking about that statement now. I mean, potentially. Like, if you really think about it, everything like needs a lot of info to really appreciate. Like, people think I don't know, soccer is an interesting one because it's so popular around the world, but to truly appreciate it, you have to have kind of understand a lot of things, you know. You have to know what a corner is, you know, have to know what a free throw is. Sorry, free kick is, what a throw in is, what a penalty is, what a yellow card is, a red card, kickoff, a half, how time is measured, what a foul is, what differentiates a normal foul from a yellow card and a red card, what a sending off is, what effect a sending off has on either side. You know, it's, if you're coming from a base of zero, like zero understanding of what the sport is, soccer is an incredibly hard sport to understand. you know, what a dive is, you know, why attacking midfielders are the most important position on the field for some reason. You know, like it's quite an impenetrable sport, like thing, like a pastime, and you know, form of entertainment, really. Yet billions of people watch it. So I think that okay, so another 1.35 vid, or maybe the board has just decided that 1.35 is the new cool thing. All right, 1.4 as before. So I think if you think about things deeply, like it's quite interesting the conclusions you can come to. And lots of things are quite complex. Like, just to give a silly example, you know, social media. I'm old enough to remember that social media was something that was frowned upon. Like social media existed before Facebook and Twitter, but it was just for the geeks. You know, I didn't attach the drive, so that's, you know, it's always a problem. It was only for the geeks, because like, why would anybody spend any time trying to understand it? But then once it became socially acceptable, once there was a fear of missing out, once, you know, it was the done thing, suddenly even borderline illiterate people understand social media now. So people don't engage with benching because they either don't know what that exists, or they don't consider it to be a relevant thing. I think a surprisingly small number of people really choose the forms of entertainment that they spend time on. I think the majority of people spend time on certain forms of entertainment because that's what their friends watch or do, or that's the popular thing. So in a, you know, in a highly sort of theoretical, highly fantasy kind of world where benching is watched by 1 billion people and football only gets 10 viewers, I think everyone would be fine with it. They wouldn't consider it to be a complex thing. I know this is sort of like a really abstract way of thinking about it, but I really think like this sort of momentum thing is huge. I think that soccer is popular because it's popular. If we were to start from square one again, if we were to, again, in this highly, you know, sort of theoretical scenario where the world doesn't have sport, and then 5 forms of sport are put forward as the new entertainment for the masses, soccer may not even win. If you put forward like dressage, horse riding, clay pigeon shooting, soccer, basketball, and rowing, you might be surprised with what would actually win. You know, maybe people would be so into rowing, they'd be like, this is really cool. This is just a race. I don't have to understand anything. I don't have to learn anything. It's just a bunch of people going as hard as they can, and at the end, somebody crosses the line first. That is actually way more approachable of a sport than soccer is. But we are where we are because we are where we are. So, you know, sort of, in a way, sort of irrelevant what all of the things that I'm talking about. Gaelic football, now that is a sport. I agree. But what's even better is hurling. Look up hurling on YouTube. The fastest team sport in the world that is played on a pitch. The fastest team sport, bar none, is ice hockey, which is kind of cheating because you just sort of float along. But in terms of a sport where you're actually moving from A to B using your own legs, which I know you do in ice hockey as well, but there you get a bit of assistance from, you know, the ice. Hurling is great. I've been to some hurling games. Okay, let's start off at our 19 multiplier. So 3.8. None of the chips so far had any issue of passing 3.8 at 1.4 VCore. So to bring the discussion back from abstract thought back to something a little bit more realistic, if you're talking about, benching in a vacuum, is it approachable or not? Well, I would argue that it is. All that happens is you set a V-core, you set a frequency, you run a bench, and it either finishes or it doesn't. And then when it finishes, you get a number. And the number is either big enough to satisfy your needs or it isn't. So it's actually quite simple. A lot is made about latency and memory timings and all those things. They're quite secondary, really. It's sort of like to talk about memory timings for 2D benching. Yeah, of course, like you just load a profile. You may not even understand what you're doing, and that's good enough. To improve on that profile, that's sort of the same as, I don't know, like a footballer, a soccer player changing his or her shoes. It's just sort of adjusting the last 2 or 3%. One shoe is as good as another nowadays, I would argue. Okay, so maybe I'm in the minority here. Maybe somebody here is going to disagree with me, but that's really my feeling about it. That, for an absolute world record, the average bencher doesn't have the chip for it anyway. So what difference do the timings make? What difference does the thermal paste make? Or the ambient temperature or the CPU pot? You don't have the chip for it anyway. No matter what you do 10 handstands before you bench. You still not. The chip is still not going to be good enough. Hurling looks amazing. Yes, it is. They also break each other's jaws and stuff by hitting each other with a stick, but it's fun for the spectator, not necessarily for the person playing it. All right, just gonna close my door here. Getting a bit of a draft. So I have about 25 liters left in the tank. So if anyone has any very specific requests on what they'd like to see me bench on LN2, I'm open to them, because I'm really sort of struggling to think what I want to use this LN2 for. I mean, I can always go back to 10900K, but I was having software issues. I'm getting a pretty big delay on the stream. I thought low latency mode was on. Yeah, I do have it on. Interesting. So this is going to pass. Don't touch the secondaries. There's always exceptions like Geekbench, 3D Mac Physics. There's certain things that are very sensitive to particular timing, but it's all on the margins. Like I say, you've got to have the chip for it. It's different when you've got the chip for it. It's different. Everything becomes different. You are trying to eke out the last 0.5% or whatever, but when you're a couple of hundred, in the case of 10900K, the top chips in the world can do 7G, Geekbench 3. My chip can do 6.8. When you're a couple of hundred megahertz off, it really doesn't matter, And I'm even lucky. I mean, Gigabyte gave me an above average chip. Like, that was kind of pre-binned. A lot of retail 10900Ks are not 6.8. They're 6.6, or maybe even worse. 6.7, 6.6, 6.5 something. So here's talking about 6 gigahertz. Here's a 3.9 gigahertz dual core run for your viewing pleasure. You won't see this on any other overclocking stream. Okay, time to go up. 775 and 939. So I have 5 LAN parties. 939 LAN parties. I think I need to add a column to this thing. So this chip did 3.8 G. Let's just start recording all the points. All right. So yeah, I have one SLI and I have 4 Ultra Ds. Some of them are dead and half dead, but I do want to come back to 939. I also have an expert. Just because it's here, I may as well show it. Let me start my run first though. So we've upped the voltage by 50 millivolts. There we go. And I think it was 19.5 is what we want. Let's just double check into CPU-Z. This should pass. So I bought this board from Obscure Paradox in the UK. Really good bencher. And it's got the infamous DFI layout with DIMM slots in between the IO and the socket. So that's how you distinguish between, very easily, between like an Ultra D and an Expert. So the Expert and the Venus have this configuration, and the Ultra D and the SLI have the slots across the top, which is still like a DFI special kind of layout, but this layout is even more special, really. And it's just such a clean board. I can't wait to get back to 939. One of the things holding me back with 939 is that I don't have any WinBond. WinBond memory. I'm still trying to source it. It's just hard to get that stuff. Do you have any WinBond? I have TCCD, which was actually running quite well. I think I was getting fuck, I can't remember. Like 450. Does that make sense? 450 CL 2.5. Let me look it up. What was I bidding? I think I was bidding Venice's 3000 plus Venice. As our run is looking like it's going to complete. Come on, Harbot, you can do it. Yeah, I think I tuned the timings quite a bit for the 1M run. Yeah, it wasn't 450, it was actually 550. Okay, that makes more sense. So for TCCD, this is pretty decent. CL 2.5, 550. You know, idle down at 0. That's pretty damn, you know, like 2.9 VDIM. You're getting into pretty good territory here. But if you compare that to you know, what people are doing on Winbond, it's a completely different world. I don't know if this is even the best example, but let's check. So we've got our mate Stellaris here, an absolute legend of a bencher on single stage, doing a little bit slower on the clocks, but CL2, which is the key here. And 1T, I don't think, oh yeah, I think it's DDR2 that can't do 1T, isn't it? So 274 versus 263, but then CL2 versus 2.5. Really, really strong. But I've done a good amount of bidding on 939 on the chip side, and I have good chips, and I want to take them cold. So we have a score. So 3.9. Can we get a 4G? I hope this stuff just doesn't wall on me. Non-BH5 and CH5 Winbond. That's interesting. I didn't know that existed, but makes sense. So the thing about Winbond as well is that, you know, DDR is already quite old, obviously, because we're on DDR4 already. But then inside of DDR, Winbond is also the older IC than TCC-C and TCC-D. So DDR lasted, that generation lasted quite a couple of years. So availability is pretty sketchy at this point. Up to our good old 1.5 volts. My sticks are older than me. I can believe that. I think I was watching tennis the other day, and there was a player that was younger than 9/11. That blew my mind. I remember 9/11 quite vividly, actually. It's probably the first time that something happened that was so significant that like my parents allowed me to, and my brother to watch TV like for an entire afternoon and evening, just glued to the news channels. There was the 2000 election as well, though, so those two events are like generational events, even though they came 1 year apart, less than 1 year apart. And now we've got the Rona, which, you know, it's not something you can watch on TV because it takes too long. I'm sure there's some nutters out there who are still glued to their TV, you know, 7 months later or whatever, 8 months later. But most have given up. So 775, what board on 775 do you have? Do you have a Rex or a DDR3 Asus, or what are you running? I might have to start going to a higher V-core. I'm really not seeing the separation between chips here. Because this is going to pass, so what did we say was going to be the next? P5E premium? Yeah, they die a lot. So s'mores or the fruity beer? What do you think? So this is this is an amber ale, And this is a wheat beer. I'll wait until the end of this run before I make a decision. Evo. That's also DDR3 board, right? What chips are you running there? Unlocked chips? Or Wolfdales? Or what are you running? Quads? I wish there were some sort of temp monitoring. Conroe and Allendale. Okay. That's sort of the older generation. In a way. I think this is going to pass. Former bencher in Sweden. Anyway, you're in the EU, so it's easy to get stuff from other former benchers in other countries. Come on, little chip. Calathea. Yeah, he has some good stuff. Thankfully, we've had some older, well, old school. I don't want to call them old. That's insulting. But some old school benchers start up again in Australia. He actually subbed something on September. Oh well. Laptop overclocking. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, so 4G passes at 1.5 volts. Let's try 4.1 again, but the last chip didn't do it. And the last chip had the same vid, so I'm not expecting miracles. Let's try 1.55. What can go wrong? So for Conroe, do you have the unlocked chips like I think it's called the X6800? All right. Time for a mango beer. Nice. It's nice and refreshing on a day like today. Only 22 degrees apparently, but it feels a bit warmer than that. E6550. And what cooling method do you use? Water? So we've got our 1.55 volts. Going back to 4.1 gigahertz. It's funny how CPU voltages have moved in this 1 volt to 2 volt space for so long. Like, I know that the slotted processors and the early like socket 7 stuff and that kind of thing, socket A, they go over 2 volts, but in general, in spite of the fact that process has improved quite a lot, we can still push 1.9 volts on like 7 nanometers. I would have thought that there would be more sensitivity around that. You know, the sort of rule of thumb is always that the smaller you go in process, the more likely you're going to kill on high voltage, but it really doesn't seem to be the case. Let's see if we can get a 4.2 valid out. Can't even set 4.2. Dice, nice. Dice is fun. Dice is really chilled out. I've run it before, but the price of it here is so much compared to LN2 that it just doesn't make any sense. Even running LN2 at dice temperatures is cheaper. Like, makes more sense than running dice. That's how expensive dice is. Yeah, no, that's the right. Let's get a valid out, just in case there's any surprises in that area. Hello, Easy Tune. Oh, there you are. Started 21.5. Let's call out a 4G. So that chip, I would say, is ever so slightly worse than number 9. Let's do one of the 0931s. So let's do the number 7. Managed to get the block off without the CPU attached this time. It's always good. So where do you get dice? Do you go to the supermarket? I know some people in Germany who just go to like Aldi or something to buy dice. It's pretty nice. Here you still need to get a delivery van out to you, just like LN2, really. Not quite as complicated as LN2, but almost. All right, let's see. What I'm hoping for is a vid that isn't 1.35 volts and a Cinebench result at 1.5 volts that isn't 4G. That's what I'm hoping for. Higher or lower, I don't really care, but just something different than the last two chips. Even to get alcohol in Sweden is hard. I remember like is the shop it's like government controlled, the only shop that sells alcohol, and it's called like System Bolagen or something like this. It's kind of funny. I went there. I went to Gothenburg with my 1.35 vid. Surprise, surprise. Let's try 1.4 again. I went there with my girlfriend at the time, and I was 21 and she wasn't, and we went into Systembolagen or whatever it's called, and it's just all the security everywhere, and we're just like trying to buy stuff for the whole weekend, and we have like this basket full of beer and you know, pear cider and all the local stuff, and then we get to checkout, and I'm the one like paying and stuff, but the person at the checkout is like, I need to see your ID, and I'm like, here's my ID, and then she's like, well, her ID as well, and it's like we just went to all this effort to picking out all this stuff and going to checkout and waiting for it all to be scanned, and then they're like, you can't have it because a member of your party is not 21 or 20. I think it's 20 in Sweden, right? Like it's some weird number like that. It's not 18, it's something higher than 18. So it's either 20 or 21. Go to Denmark instead. Yeah, that's what a lot of people do, like the booze cruises and stuff. All right, we've got a new chip in the system. Excitement is building. 1.4 volts. Um, let's be bold and make an attempt at 3.9 straight away. Let's just see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? Well, it hasn't crashed yet. System bull, I guess. Okay. I mixed up the N and the T, but considering it was like 12 years ago or something, it's pretty close. So, Sweden's fun. I think it was the first time I went to a vegan, randomly, the first time I went to a vegan restaurant was in Gothenburg as well. No, that was actually in Stockholm. And the sun stays up forever in the summer kind of time. I remember staying on a hostel that was a houseboat, and the sun would be up until like 10:30 at night or something crazy like that. Fun times. Now it's on the other side of the world to me. It used to be just a €1 flight away. How times change. So I'm waiting to fill this column, and it seems like it's going to be 3.9. So that's exciting. One of these days I need to come back to single core Cinebench. Oh, second for Celeron 420. Nice. That is actually really solid. Got some cell shocks. I have some Celerons I need to bin. I've been lazy about 775. Harbor Bronze. That's nice. So what have you been doing on the 8400? Always interesting to see what the board can do in terms of PCLK. 615 multi-core isn't bad at all. So W prime 32M. We have a pass. So it's a 3.9G. That essentially means that unless something miraculous happens, these two chips are out. Since I would imagine there'd be at least one better chip. Well, it could even be just be the same chip from the same batch. There would be at least one chip as good as this chip in the remaining ones. Or maybe the one I LN2 is just the best. In either case, I'd keep those two, and then these two would be goners. Um, so yeah, let's just try for 4G at 1.4. Unlikely as that may seem. So, oof, insta fail. Okay, 1.45 next. So I think it's not Falky. Wow, and Cascade is first. Where are you though? Hold on. Just dialing in the V core. Oh, this is Super Pi 32M. I was trying to look at W Prime 32M, which is a very different bench to Super Pi. Clicked OK. That's maddening. Okay, so he beats Scunny at a lower frequency and Scanic. That's pretty impressive. So let's click through them while we're waiting for a thing to boot. So this is DDR2. That might and XP. That might explain things. Why it's slower than you clock for clock. This is also DDR2. Interesting OS. So 4.25, half a second slower than 4.4. Yeah, efficiency looks good. Use Terroraptor's DLL swapping tweak. So 4G at 1.4 failed, as expected. Now let's go 1.45. Stock windows. Interesting though that Sweden has a higher age for shops than restaurants. That doesn't really make sense. I haven't heard of that being the case anywhere else really. Excited to have a DDR3 board. Yeah, it's so hard to find a DDR3 board. I'm currently kind of debating whether I want to get a Gigabyte EP45T USB 3, something like that. It's not the extreme, but it's still one of the ultra durable boards. Just because my Rex is not great. I should really try my Rex with cold Northbridge actually, to see if I can salvage something there. Even though it came from their Bauer and Splave bought it and then Splave sold it to me, I think somewhere along the line it got got a little bit degraded. I should look into fixing the Northbridge cooling though. That could definitely be the case that's killing FSB. Yeah, this chip just looks better. I mean, I'm just gonna be cheeky and put 4G down. So I think these two chips were pretty much identical. I don't know why this chip had such issues with Valid, but in terms of actual load, I remember these results being the same. So yeah, I have a lot of DDR2 boards. I have an EP45 Extreme, so a non DDR3 version of that, which is a pretty board to look at. I have a Maximus, which I think is a DDR 2 board, that's pretty good. 5 to 3 boards. In Australia, it'd probably be 5 per like 5 years. Like it's really, really hard. I mean, I was just about to say Sweden is a small country, but in terms of population, Australia is probably the same size country. It's funny to think about. I mean, Australia is huge in terms of area. So, talking about area, this is the for Country Cup. Simon Sydney. We usually all gather in Adelaide, and usually fly in. It's like a 2-hour flight. But the drive that I'm considering doing just this year, just because I've been curious about it, is this one. So 14 hours straight. I would obviously do it across multiple days, but there's I'm a bit into like space and stuff. There's a dish in parks, so I'd like to detour to parks. So now it's already a 16-hour drive, and I'd also like to go to Mildura. So yeah, this is the basics of the drive. It's about a 16-hour drive. So on a good day, I can comfortably drive about 4 or 5 hours. So you're talking like a 4 or 5 day drive. And I think I'm going to do it. I think just with the Rona, there's no reason not to. I can't leave the country. Australian residents are not allowed to leave, so I may as well do a little bit of touristing domestically. Excuse me, I have hay fever. So 4G at 1.45 V core does pass. So now it's time for 4.1G, which is actually the top I've ever passed on any of these chips, ambient, at any V core. Unsurprisingly, we get a instant blue screen. So that will give you an idea of how big Australia is. Just to drive between the two southeastern bits of it, it's 4 days of driving. What have you been benching recently, Hardware Barbecue? Anything fun? I should probably been through my GTX 980s in GPU Pi on Island 2. Things are alright. You know, 2020 sucks, obviously. But I've probably been luckier than most, so I can't complain. NR200p Mini ITX, is that like a pre-built system? I don't recognize the name of it, so I mean, summer's coming. Still got a job and a roof over my head, so I can't complain. A lot of people are doing it much tougher. So 4.1 at 1.45 did not pass. Let's try 4.1 at 1.5. So it's a mini ITX motherboard, but what socket? Ah, okay, a case. That makes sense. Looks like it might pass. I mean, the possibilities are endless, right? I mean, maybe this chip is even deletable. Who knows? It's quite a low end SKU, all things considered. So it might be pasted under the lid. What do I think of the next Ryzen? I kind of gave my summary earlier, but I don't mind repeating myself. Um, for benching, it doesn't seem that exciting. Um, I don't like the fact that the prices have gone up. 300 US dollars for a 6-core entry level chip. I know there's probably going to be another release, but considering that for Ryzen first gen, the lineup was released. I know the Ryzen 7s came first, but that made it clear that there was going to be Ryzen 5s and probably Ryzen 3s. But once the Ryzen 5s and the Ryzen 3s were out, for first gen, you had a pretty complete lineup. And now AMD can kind of afford to do this stupid sort of thing, you know, this sort of like baity kind of thing where they release an incomplete lineup that starts at 300 US dollars and can just kind of say take it or leave it, you know. Intel is crap now, so either if you want the next generation of Ryzen, it's $300 or more. And I think the 16 core is $50 more as well, so that's disappointing. That's very that's disappointing. I've also heard that it's the same IO die as before, so the same from a benching perspective, the same issues will still happen about, you know, cold boot bug behavior. So it's not interesting benching wise. It's not interesting value wise. Yeah, the IPC, the headline IPC numbers are impressive, but those were leaked a long time ago. Yeah, maybe some people are just surprised by it, but I'm not. And frequency is only up 100 megahertz. And I mean, things being the way they are now with turbo, how relevant is advertised frequency anymore anyway? So basically, you're talking whatever it is, 19% IPC increase, but no frequency increase. So it's a lot of increase to have from one generation to another in the IPC column. But if you take the combined frequency increase and IPC increase as the overall performance improvement from one generation to the next, it suddenly kind of becomes not so big a number. That's my take on it. Maybe that's controversial. People like to hype things. For me, for example, Comet Lake was a pretty good release. There was no hype leading up to it. Nobody had any expectations, and it was actually quite good. Whereas this, expectations were quite high, and in my case at least, they weren't met. So this is 200 points. That's pretty good. And the problem too is that AMD now is the new Intel, you know. I was talking about this before. The fact that now you pay more money per core AMD than Intel, in spite of the fact that Intel has monolithic dies and an old process, and AMD has a CCX approach and a new process, is kind of bizarre. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's a money grab, and I mean, you know, we live in a capitalistic world, so we shouldn't be surprised. But I don't like this trend that AMD is on. You know, the 3000 series was already expensive for what it was. Now we have the 5000 series that's even more expensive for what it is, in my opinion. You know, now bizarrely, if you want cores, you may be better off at Intel. And Intel, you know, considering that the next generation won't come out until Q1 2021, will very likely refresh or discount the current gen. So this snapshot on the 9th of October 2020, Intel is already looking better price per core, basically. And they haven't even discounted their old crap yet, you know. So at a time where AMD should be blowing Intel out of the water, it's kind of a wash in some ways, you know, which is weird. But I can't blame AMD for that. I can certainly see maybe some profits from the CPU division going into Navi and stuff, and there's reasons to be sort of optimistic overall, but I wouldn't want to be a launch day purchaser of this generation. I can sort of appreciate the reason for existence of this generation, and I can certainly buy into the fact that it's going to make AMD a lot of money, and AMD making a lot of profit being good overall for the industry. But I'm just going to be a bystander. I'm not going to buy it, you know? So that's an issue. I mean, 4.2, why not? Let's try 4.2. All right. Yeah, the 5000 series was good value for money at the time. Okay, let's do valids. Same thing with the 3000 series. I mean, I bought a Ryzen 5 1600 on launch and I was happy with it. And I bought a Ryzen 5 2600 on launch and I was happy with it. I didn't feel like there was price gouging going on. And for the 3000 series, I fully intended to buy a 3600. And in the course of launch day, I realized that it was a bad idea. That was a bad decision. That would be a waste of money. That all these cold bug issues, and there was various reasons, but I didn't buy it. And I was kind of ready again, if there was to be a 5600, to go back into this kind of tradition of buying the lowest end 6 core on launch. And I see absolutely no reason to do it. And of course, I mean, I'm not the average person. I'm a bencher. I see CPUs through a completely different lens than a gamer or someone who's into productivity or whatever. I mean, there's Ryzen in my laptop. I'm happy with Ryzen Mobile. I'm sure once Ryzen Mobile Zen 3 Mobile comes out, it will be great. But in terms of just benching, I don't know. I mean, they didn't even come out with a new IMC, so you can't even expect better memory performance. I mean, you can with, you know, more cache, the latency stuff they've done and stuff, but in terms of purely the IMC, they're just happy to stick with what they've got. So it's almost like it's a Zen 2 Plus, you know, which, yeah, is disappointing. All right, let's quickly run off some valids. All right, that's a 4.2 valid. 4.3 sets. What hangs? 4.2, that's among the best we've had. Let's have a quick look back at my little table here. We've already done an 0925 up here, and we've already done an 0931. So 0925 CPMW. I should really be doing the 2010 chips. If I can find it. Let's see if I can find it. Let's just keep going on with the next one on the list. I think is the easiest. Yeah, that's the other aspect of this whole thing, is that Intel is at its low point now. It's still struggling along with 14 nanometer. AMD is kind of at its high point. You know, it has the biggest process advantage that it can possibly wish for, and this is still the best it can do, you know. I mean, sure, you know, Intel is kind of arrogant, but I think they will obviously learn some lessons from the 10 nanometer disaster, and I don't really expect them to ever again in the foreseeable future have as much of a process gap as they have right now. You know, I know it's all just marketing terms, but 7 nanometer versus 14 nanometer, that's a big gap. You know, you can argue that 7 nanometer is in true terms more of a 10 nanometer or whatever, but it's still a process gap. And you know, TSMC is doing well on its 5 nanometer by all accounts, but Intel is also not going to be sitting idly by, you know, so we'll have a 10 versus 7, or maybe a 5 versus 7, who knows, but it's going to be closer than it is currently. That's my point. And Intel is also going to switch away from monolithic dies, so in every aspect, Intel is going to have less of a gap with AMD. And they're also by now tuned into the fact that they need to now operate their business differently. You know, they no longer have the massive profit margins they had previously, with, you know, sticking with quad cores as an i7 for so many years and stuff. That's gone, but they've had quite a while for that to sink in, you know, to really realize that. And I don't know what's the right approach. You know, do Do you sort of take the Amazon approach of market share over profit, or do you take the approach that AMD ended up taking, which is profit over market share? Essentially, that's what they're doing. Is they're happy with their current market share or maybe increasing it slightly, but they really want a big profit margin. That's why they increased every SKU by $50. I mean, $250 for the entry level 6-core on the Ryzen 3000 series was already a lot compared to what the price was previously. And then they increased the price again by 20%. So clearly they want to maximize profits over market share. Whereas what they could do is, you know, I think it's within the realm of possibility for them to do maybe like a 16 core for $500, you know. I'm not saying that it's necessarily smart business wise, but that way they could increase their market share. Instead of a 50-50, we could see 75-25. But obviously that's not what they want, and that's fair enough. It's up to them to decide. Looking at it short term, well, there's two different ways you can look at it, right? You can consider that to be short term, or you can consider it to actually be a long term strategy. This kind of 1.325 vid, that's interesting. 325, so we need to go plus 75 millivolts. Because mind share is important. Like that's what happens on the GPU side, right? On the GPU side, everyone knows that NVIDIA GeForce is the thing to buy. So it doesn't matter what AMD releases; they're never going to be market leader. The most recent, like the most prominent recent example was 290X. 290X at time of release was the fastest single core card in the world, but nobody bought it because they just had this notion in their head that NVIDIA is fastest. So it didn't matter that they weren't fastest. And AMD has been struggling with that for a long time. So I think that what they're doing on the CPU side is they're trying to create this mind share that NVIDIA already has on the GPU side, which is optimize your chips to be just dominating gaming wise to the point that the AMD brand will get associated with gaming, you know, long term. And then, you know, the interesting thing about that is that potentially, eventually, you can shift the focus away from gaming. You can optimize for something else, but still claim the mind share, because we'll still stick in people's minds that, you know, Ryzen 7 is for gaming, for example, or Ryzen 9 is for gaming, Ryzen 5 is for gaming, whatever. So yeah, I mean, obviously it has a short-term component. They are maximizing the profits, but I would argue that it also has a long-term component. Let's go for 3.9. Let's not fuck around. Okay, insta fail. Let's go 3.8. Oof. Okay, let's quickly try and get a pass, some kind of pass out at 1.4 volts. Radeon 7 died for RTG sins. I don't know. That was that's kind of the theory going around, isn't it? That RTG only really gets budget, let's say, gets effort assigned to it when a new console generation is coming out. So that's why the upcoming RDNA version 2 is going to be good because AMD does semi-custom stuff, and amongst that is the high volume console stuff, and console generations are infrequent. So in those in-between years, they just release whatever, whereas now it's not an in-between year, it's an on year, and that's why they're coming out with a really good architecture, apparently, if the leaks are to be believed. But Radeon 7 still made sense, the world's first 7 nanometer GPU. That is a good headline. And it was good for compute and mining and all that stuff. All right, 3.8. I mean, it's the smaller kind of sister of the CPU arm, right? So they just kind of have to stay present. And that's kind of it, They're never going to catch up with NVIDIA. It's an unfair fight anyway. NVIDIA does... Wow. This chip might be pretty bad. Let's try 3.7. What does that mean? Like NVIDIA, all of NVIDIA's business, virtually all of NVIDIA's business is GPUs. So it's no surprise that they're beating AMD, because for AMD, it's just a side gig. Yeah. So you have to see in that context, what would NVIDIA be without GPUs? Nothing. Whereas AMD without GPUs, it would be a bit of a shame, but they'd survive. But console graphics is a profitable market, so I wouldn't just dismiss that. Can't even do 3.7. That's an interesting chip. I'm glad I'm seeing some variance between the different chips. Okay, 3.6 then. I'll eventually just end up running it at stock the way things are going. Yeah, that's the kind of argument all the time, is that people in general want AMD to make GPUs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that those people are prepared to buy AMD GPUs. Like, people want competition to NVIDIA to keep the prices low, but those same people most likely would still buy an NVIDIA GPU. So that then means what's the point in AMD competing, really? It's just for the sake of people being happy, but it doesn't necessarily mean more sales. So it was kind of smart what they did, with Polaris, RX 480, RX 580, just staying in the mid range. And you know, Intel is a long way away, and they may never get there. It's arguably a more complex area to enter as a competitor than CPUs, and CPUs aren't easy. So that's why we're in the state we're at, where we just have two companies, or maybe even just 1.5 companies, making GPUs, because it's so hard to enter this area. On that note, cheers. Well, the chip isn't completely defective. That much I can say. You mean Intel isn't going to happen in the foreseeable future? Yeah, RTG. Separates RTG. Well, it used to be ATI. Okay, so we've got a 3.6 gigahertz pass here. For me, that's borderline defective, but anyway. Okay, let's try 1.45 volts. I'm not holding my breath, but let's give it a go. I mean, ATI wasn't able to survive on its own, so, and I don't think the kind of competitive landscape has really changed since then, even though it's quite a while ago that ATI merged with AMD. So them surviving on their own, I don't really see that happening. Okay, let's try 6.7 at 1.45 volts. Yeah, red PCBs were really good. No, won't do it. I wonder if I have a bad mount or something, but I think this chip is just garbage. I'll try 1.5, and if it still doesn't pass, then I'll boot at 1.5 in case EasyTune isn't setting it. But otherwise, that will be the end of this chip. seems to be passing. All right, quick reboot. Not freezy. I grew up in County Cork, if that means anything to you. Slow boot going on again. So we had a 3.6 pass at 1.45, but no pass at 1.5. Now just checking if booted from bias is any different. All right, let's try that again. Yeah, I've spent too much time away from Ireland to really have an Irish accent anymore. Don't know if that's fortunate or unfortunate, but just the way it goes. Left Ireland in 2011. So that's some time ago. Hopefully you're all safe over there in Dublin. I heard things are not looking so great at the moment in terms of coronavirus. Maybe I need my VRM fan back on the rig. That's the secret weapon. All right, 1.5 volts. The block seems fine. But it won't even pass 3.7, so that's a bit of an issue. Purge the scoundrels of society. Fair enough. That's a positive spin on things. All right, enjoy your class. Nice hanging out with you. So will this chip even do 4 valid? So it does, it seems to do 4 valid, but it won't pass 3.7 Cinebench. It must have really like one core that's really bad. So let's try 4.7 valid or 4.1 valid. Okay. we'll end it there on a blue screen. So this was chip number 6. It did 4 valid, 3.6 Cinebench, NA, and all the other. So 3.6, I think it needed 1.45 for that. It doesn't matter. It's a reject chip anyway. So in summary, this chip did 4.1. I think this did 4.1 as well, didn't it? So these two are quite similar. I would probably still go with the lower vid one, but we've got two rejects here and another reject here, and then we've got 3 more to try. So that's what's clocking today. I was just about to end the stream after 3 hours actually, but if you ever need to know what is clocking, just do exclamation point rig. So I have a bag of Phenom 2 550 black editions. I benched through 4 of them today. Well, I binned through 5 of them today actually. I have 3 more to bin. Okay, so I have 9 in total actually. 1 has seen LN2 before, 3 I haven't touched, and 5 I checked today. And of the 5, I've got 3 rejects and 2 maybes. What I'm hoping to get, I'm hoping to test the LN2 chip on ambient as well, just as a control basically. And then maybe end up with 3 chips or so. One of them probably being the LN2 chip to hold on to, 6 to sell, and then try the 3 on an LN2, because there's a few things I still need to get. I have 3rd place in Super Pi. Obviously I want first. Easier to ask. Where am I based now? Sydney, Australia. So I've got a 6.4 valid with maybe a little bit better pace, a little bit more patience. I can get first here, most likely, even with the same chip. I have Pi Fast first, but I don't have 32M and 1M. So 1M, I'm missing about 100 megahertz here, so that does require a different chip. For 32M, I would expect about a 6.2-ish pass. So I think the existing chip with a better OS and memory tuning would be able to do that. But essentially, what I'm hoping for is for one of the other 8 chips to be better, and for me to be able to just get rid of the chip I had. It was lucky because it was the first chip I tried. Anyway, everyone's turning up as I'm about to have dinner and turn off the stream. But that's life. I streamed a bit early today, so I was taking that chance. I do have a little bit of LN2, but not even a little bit. I have about 25 to 30 liters of LN2 left over. That's my last viewer. The other 3 are empty. So there may be an LN2 stream in the works. Probably next Wednesday, something like that. But anyway, thanks for watching, and until next time.